Distribution provided by Cloud Sigma, the cloud that adapts to you. Visit cloudsigma.com/thisweekin for a free $200 credit.
Welcome to This Week in Venture Capital. We're back, and today we are talking with Jonathan Strauss from Awe.sm.
There is no stopping an idea whose time has come. But the best entrepreneurs don't stand still with an idea. They get to the business of getting things done. So step forward with your idea, and when you're ready, sit down and tell me how you want to change the world. This week in Venture Capital.
Welcome to This Week in Venture Capital. It's been about a year since I've been on. And for my first show back, I'm very excited that today we have Jonathan Strauss of Awe.sm. It's my favorite named company, awe.sm. Awesome. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So, Awe.sm. We're going to talk a bit about your background, how you got into startups, what your company does. But before we do a deep dive, why don't you just give the headlines of what Awe.sm is?
Sure. Awe.sm is a platform that application developers use to understand how sharing behavior from within their application is driving value to their business.
How sharing behavior is driving value to their business. Now, what does that mean?
Well, everybody is integrating tweets and tweet buttons, like buttons, or Twitter auto posting, all these things. In fact, the Ustream video cast that we're on right now, right, has all these social features to try and drive, pull in user engagement and user acquisition. So that's really a kind of trying to drive business value through these product features. And what we're helping our customers do is understand on a per tweet or a per like basis how many visits, page views, signups, revenue are being driven, and then put those data to work for business intelligence to make better products and or to build features like leaderboards or in-app analytics that they show their customers, those kinds of things.
How did you get the idea for Awe.sm? When did the company start? What was the aha moment for you? Because a lot of founders that I talk to or want to be founders, one of the big things they say is, I just don't know what idea.
The idea was definitely started at a higher level, obviously. I didn't go out saying, there's a whole bunch of application developers who need this, and I'm going to build a platform per se. But it did come, as I think most great ideas do, from personal pain. So I had left, I was working at Yahoo. I left Yahoo in 2008. And as I was figuring out what I wanted to do next, I was doing some consulting. And I was also helping out some friends down here in Los Angeles who were trying to kind of ride the YouTube stardom track, and basically were asking me to be their pet geek and help them figure out their social media marketing strategy. So this was 2008, so Twitter was relatively new. Facebook was still Facebook groups, not pages.
So you were a social media marketing consultant? Oh, and are you ready to admit that publicly?
I didn't get paid for it, so that's it was just as a favor. Yeah. I guess I have just admitted that publicly. I've been paying penance ever since. But yeah, yes, I was a social media marketing consultant for a few of my friends, and in doing so, having a background in kind of more conventional online marketing and seeing what I'd been exposed to at Yahoo, really, the rise of performance marketing, I wanted to apply those methodologies, data-driven marketing decisions and ultimately product decisions, as you see in paid search or email marketing or even graphical media today. And there seemed to be a big gap in social. And so believing in the potential of social as a means to drive value from a marketing perspective and from a product perspective, and seeing this gap in the ability to actually understand that value at a granular level, the ROI, in an actionable way, that's kind of what set me down the path to building what's now Awe.sm.
Now, somewhat when you started, there was a company that gathered a lot of attention that seemed to be competitive with you called Bitly. And I guess Bitly had already launched before you did, or was it?
Bitly existed, and
was it part inspiration for your idea?
You know what's interesting is that so full disclosure, you're.
Oh yes, I'm an investor in Awesome. I was going to disclose that.
And you and I met summer of 2009, I think. I had been working on the seeds of the idea for at least 9 months prior, and the first potential investor I ever spoke to was Andy Weissman at BetaWorks.
Okay.
BetaWorks being kind of the parent company or incubator from which Bitly sprung. And so I had a lot of exposure to the BetaWorks product set, including Bitly, and worked closely with them in terms of trying to prototype my initial visions of ROI, measuring the ROI of social. And as I was going through those motions, I remember I specifically sent Andy an email a few months into what I was trying to build. And I said, listen, I think I'm going to have to build something that is asymmetrically competitive to Bitly.
Right.
It doesn't do the same things that Bitly does, because if it did, I would use Bitly. But it's going to be something that people are not going to use both Awesome and Bitly. I didn't have a name for it yet. And so from the start, I guess the inspiration was to build something that served a different purpose and did different things than Bitly does.
It's funny because I remember having funded you in 2009, I think it was.
Yep.
And we then started talking to other investors. It seemed no matter how different we always thought we were in what our goals were from Bitly, we couldn't get most people over the idea that we were competing with Bitly. And Bitly, of course, in what they do, was a market leader, was doing excellent things, continues to do excellent things. We don't see ourselves, at least I don't see ourselves, as competitively positioned to them. We feel like we're going after different parts of the same market. And it was hard, I'd say, going against a market leader.
Yeah, and that there's actually a lesson that kind of a startup's lessons learned that I've taken away from that experience.
You should start a blog with that name.
If only. I think it might be taken.
Yeah.
But we actually, one thing that Bitly is now famous for, that we actually originated as a feature, is the ability to kind of run tracking links on your own domain. And that was something that we built as part of, it was just kind of a core requirement I had if we were going to help people track the ROI of sharing across mediums beyond Twitter, that we were going to they were going to want to use their own domain for email, or at the time MySpace, or things like that. I didn't think they'd want to be wrapping them all in our branded links. So we built that feature very early on, and when people started to hear about that through the grapevine, that was what they started asking us for. And so while we were heads down trying to build this more robust, what I call, much to your chagrin, a campaign tracking platform, basically, for social, and all the infrastructure behind that to be able to measure the value of each share action individually and turn that into actionable data, and have that aggregation and all that stuff. Everybody was asking us for, hey, I want a vanity URL shortener. They didn't even have a name for it. It was, I want a URL shortener on my own domain. And this was one of those things that I don't know if we made the right decision or the wrong decision. I can't go back and know what would have happened if we had made another decision, but we decided to say, okay, we have this feature built, it's in our alpha, let's spend a couple weeks, if everybody's asking us for this, let's spend a couple weeks packaging this up more as a vanity URL shortener, and building a marketing site. We didn't change the product that much. We really just built a marketing site.
So, but just to give it a real world spin for people, I signed up for it. I was using, sometimes if I was tweeting something on behalf of GRP, my venture fund, we signed up for the URL grp.vc, which I thought was pretty clever. I noticed some other people did it after I did. And then I signed up for another one I thought was pretty clever. I guess I'll be self-congratulatory today, which is both sides .es, right? Because I could get
both sid.es.
exactly, and the Spanish version of that, so I could get my own URL shortener for both sides of the table. And both of those were actually signed up through Awe.sm and have awesome tracking underneath them. It seemed to me, if I could point out one thing I thought we could have done more effectively in the early days.
You weren't. It wasn't a we then.
Yeah, it was you. It was you. I feel like this is a lesson for startups, which is there were a lot of small projects that seem interesting to you at the time. For example, the Facebook share button. Mm-hmm. You built a Facebook share button. It was underpinned by awesome data. There were people who found that interesting. You built some cross-posting services that allowed you to cross-post across Twitter and across Facebook. And I think it's fair to say that because we lacked a really strong conviction about where we were ultimately going to end up as a company, we were trying to see multiple things. But the problem is that each of those got users, and every time you had users, now you had a product you had to support. So you had sort of 3 or 4 or 5 little products to support, and not the engineering resources to support them all.
Or the support resources or anything else. Yeah, I think that actually goes in line for me with the same decisions I made early on about packaging up a vanity URL shortener. I was pre-funding for a bunch of that stuff, and I was trying to be a hustler. I was looking for every angle I could get to get some traction, because I think that when you're at that stage where you have an idea, you're starting to build a prototype, you don't have any funding, the worst case scenario is you die unknown, right? That nobody hears about you and nobody knows what you do. And I guess we solved the first problem where people heard about us through all these various things that we ended up doing. The vanity URL shortener was something that got us noticed, and we launched that a year before Bitly. I actually didn't really double down or invest in that because I was dubious that enough people would go out and register domains. I didn't think it was a real product. Bitly came along and then started charging $1,000 a month for it. We came out at a $99 a year price point initially. We could have built if we had doubled down on that, and instead of saying, okay, let's take our limited resources and continue with this, the campaign tracking platform, we could have probably self-funded or got some more early revenue in a different way. But at the same time, for the next couple years, everybody thought of us as a URL shortener rather than understanding what went beyond it. And same with tweet post or the Facebook share button. Both of those actually were relatively speaking, tremendously successful. Tweet post was reviewed at the time on Mashable and TechCrunch. We actually had to shut it down or limit it to the existing users because we were having issues scaling it. And so I don't know. Yes, we ended up in less than ideal places because we had we weren't able to support those things effectively long term, and also that they distracted us as well as people's outside perceptions of us. But they did get us a certain amount of initial traction and initial awareness overall. That was, if I rewind back 3 years to before you wrote me our first check, you don't know this, but I was, leveraged up the hilt. I furloughed the developers and everything because, I was trying to play it cool with signing the papers because another week and I don't know, I would have been able to pay the Amazon bill.
Right.
So,
you had it all on personal credit cards. And, yeah.
Yeah. And a loan from my parents.
Yeah.
Convertible debt.
Did it convert with the discount?
Yes.
They took it out of your previous bar mitzvah money.
So the collateral.
Yeah. In fact, they've taken it out of your future son's bar mitzvah money.
Right.
But this is the classic tale of startups, which is often people don't easily snap their fingers and have $500,000 in seed money. And I think that's something that a lot of VCs actually forget because you just assume everyone has money and it's easy to start companies. And a lot of people are starting it on their own dime and when they don't have big savings accounts.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is come back in a moment to you. I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. We're not app.net, so we actually are allowed to have advertising on this show. And one of our advertisers is actually somebody that we had on the show before. His name is Josh Linkner. The advertiser is Detroit Venture Partners. And, Jason and I have a rule for This Week in Startups and This Week in VC, which is we're only willing to allow people to be sponsors who we ourselves endorse. And I love what Detroit Venture Partners are doing. They have set up a fund in Michigan with the goal of funding local companies and with the goal of revitalizing Detroit itself and trying to make Detroit more entrepreneurial. And I think in some ways similar to what Tony Hsieh is doing in Las Vegas to attract companies, to get buildings that are dedicated towards tech resources. If you could bring up on my computer or your computer over here, Josh actually wrote a book called Disciplined Dreaming, a proven system to drive breakthrough creativity. Feel free to show that. There we go. And this is how I first met him. I wrote a blog post about how I get my ideas and how I drive personal creativity. And I was saying a lot of it is visualization. Yeah, a lot of it's visualization. So
I think I'm halfway through that post. So.
I think the post was longer than Josh's book, actually. No, but literally, when I need to brainstorm and think, I get myself in a quiet room and I sit with blank pieces of paper and I draw boxes and I try to think about how all the boxes connect and I let my mind just go free. So I was talking about visualization as a way of trying to inspire yourself with ideas. It's very hard to inspire yourself with ideas, I think, when you have headphones on or you're in a loud office or when you've got email and Twitter flashing at you. So anyway, so I wrote that post. He reached out to me, which was great. And if you could just put this up again. Right here, we've got a video that we did, and I would encourage any of you to watch it because I thought he was great. If you search This Week in VC and Josh Linkner, this video will pop up. We did this, gosh, it must have been 18 months ago or 2 years ago or so. Anyway, the Twitter handle for them is DVP Tweets. That's Detroit Venture Partner Tweets. And the other interesting factoid about Detroit Venture Partners is one of the partners, in addition to Josh Linkner, is Magic Johnson.
I was going with that.
It was Eminem. Eminem would be good, but it's Magic Johnson. And when you think about who epitomizes an entrepreneur and someone who's interested in urban renewal, I think Magic Johnson certainly speaks to that topic. And I asked Josh offline, is Magic Johnson's name just on this? Does he really get involved? And Josh said he really got involved. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So take me back in time. Your first job out of college was Yahoo?
Not quite.
Okay.
My first, I'm from LA originally. I do live in the Bay Area now. And my dad's in the film business. And so I grew up in the film business. When I graduated college with my political philosophy degree in 2002, the nuclear winter of startups, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had the place where I had the most experience was actually film production from all my summer jobs. So I ended up working on several feature films for a year. I did 3 films all over, and then ultimately ended up at Yahoo in 2004. So that was my first. It was my first official job in technology.
Did it seem like Yahoo was past its prime in 2004, or did you feel like, the Facebook or Google of its day? When was the realization that Yahoo was no longer cool?
The realization definitely, I think there's the internal realization and there's the external realization. When I left in 2008, I had gotten to the point where I was kind of snarkily saying that the problem with working at Yahoo is that any smart people I knew thought I was an idiot, and everybody else thought I was tech support.
Right.
I think there is always that gap, especially in a large corporation, between what's happening on the ground inside the company and at the level of each individual employee, and then how the lag between when that manifests itself externally to customers, partners, the market, et cetera. And interestingly, when I joined in 2004, I started working in corporate development right off the bat, which was an amazing opportunity because it was at the time, kind of a 5,000 person organization, and as a 24-year-old, I got to be in a junior position, but a position kind of on top of everything, where I got to see across all the different geographies, all the different business units, work directly with the senior people in each of those areas. And if I had come in anywhere else within the company, I would have had much less visibility because I would have only seen that side of the business. And I will never forget what one of the people in my group, who shall remain nameless, told me at the time was, we're number one in all these categories despite ourselves.
And that was Jerry Yang who said that?
Jerry didn't talk to me at least until my second day. That was on my first day.
Gotcha.
And one thing I learned later was that prior to Lloyd Braun kind of came in when Yahoo decided to invest in the media business, so the Yahoo, the news.yahoo, sports.yahoo, finance, et cetera. Prior to that, those businesses, that business unit was running at a 90+% margin, right? It was literally, they had cheapo licensing deals for, commodity content from the AP, whatever.
Yeah.
They were putting on these shitty pages that.
But when did, we're supposed to have a swearing tip jar,
sorry.
It's okay, you're allowed to say shit.
Okay.
In fact,
I didn't wear the really profane
I had
t-shirt.
promised when I came on Jason's show to do my George Carlin routine, but
you haven't had Dave McClure on yet.
We ran out. I have.
Oh, all right.
I have. We ran out of time. In fact, I had Dave McClure on at South by Southwest, and I was wearing your shirt.
I've seen that photo.
Yeah, it was F social media shirt.
Yes.
Or what the F is social media shirt.
How does it work?
So something like that. So, but when did people inside Yahoo kind of think we're no longer cool?
I think probably
because when
2006.
you were there, Dave Goldberg was there.
Totally.
Ian Rogers was there.
I learned so much.
Terry Semel was there. Lloyd Braun.
Bradley Horowitz. You can look at the diaspora of the people who were at Yahoo at that time.
Who now runs Google Plus, right? Or is that
yeah,
Bradley
it's not
Horowitz?
clear. Yes, that Bradley Horowitz.
Yeah.
Hi, Bradley, if you're watching.
Jeff Weiner.
Who's CEO
now
of LinkedIn.
CEO of LinkedIn.
You could go down
Brad
the list.
Garlinghouse, who runs You Send It, who wrote the Peanut Butter Manifesto.
And was at AOL in the interim. You could go down the list of what everybody, basically take the director and VP level of that company in the 2005-2006 time period and go look at what they're doing now. You could probably add up that market cap of the companies that they're running that would be greater than Yahoo's today. That's off the top of my head, but I actually would do that exercise, and I believe that you.
I think LinkedIn will help a lot.
Yeah, fair enough. But one of the things I learned that was just a great opportunity early in my career is seeing what to do, what not to do is as valuable sometimes as seeing what to do. So that collection of people was amazing. They just weren't utilized.
Here's what's interesting to me. I think the strategy of Terry Semel, who had a film background or an entertainment background, was absolutely correct for Yahoo. It was just 4 or 5 years too early. And when I look at Yahoo now and I think so I don't know, it's easy to second guess on the outside, but for me, I probably would have left Ross Levinson running Yahoo. And my rationale is pretty simple. It's near impossible to reinvent yourself as a product company when the market doesn't perceive you that way, when you don't have the internal chops to do that. And Yahoo, despite itself, is still a market leader in so many categories that seem more media related. And so from my perception, and I think also about where the web is evolving, And the web increasingly is a media property. You know that I'm very interested in YouTube and video distribution. I often quote U.S. consumers watch 5.3 hours of television per day. And
no wonder we're so dumb.
But we're not going to change people, right? They eat McDonald's every day too, right? We're not going to change people to be more like us despite our aspirations for them. And so it is becoming a video platform, and Yahoo could have dominated that, not only through the Terry Semel years, but also more recently if Ross would have kept that position. And I think the positioning of Marissa coming in is pretty much saying we want to be we want to get product innovation going again. And I think even Google is struggling with how do we innovate on products. And to be honest, I think Facebook is struggling with how do we innovate on products. So what hope Yahoo?
I think that's a fair point. The only counter argument, at least I can't counter the last part about other people struggling, but in terms of someone once told me about this idea of sunk cost fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Was that me?
Wise man.
I heard he was an ass.
Tip jar. I think that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain extent that Yahoo, the only thing that Yahoo's known for at this point and has succeeded at is the media side, right? Because since I was there, that whole thing about, I knew the margins on the old media business because we were changing that. We were deciding to invest in that. And that's been kind of the only place that that people have continued to make investment that have been successful. Every product that you care about within Yahoo has come through acquisition. Even now it's been butchered, but Yahoo Mail was the first one to do kind of the Outlook, the desktop style Ajax, basically in the browser. That was through the acquisition of a company called Oddpost.
And then they bought Rocket Mail after that, or
not?
Oddpost was the company run by Tony Schneider, right?
Oddpost,
who now runs Automatic WordPress.
Yes, and also Ethan Diamond, who runs Bandcamp.
Okay.
But then they got Flickr, they got Upcoming, which is RIP. All of these things that basically, other than Yahoo Search, was really the only homegrown product up until that point. You had that succeeded. You had Yahoo Mail, the original Yahoo Mail, which that was through acquisition as well. Yahoo Groups was through acquisition as well. Personal, I can't remember how Personals got there, but I could go on and on. The whole joke at the time was there was Yahoo Pets, right? There was every Yahoo anything.
On the comment stream, Adam Wynne, WYNNE, says, engineers love a geek in charge. It's a great draw for talent. I agree with that, and I think that for engineers, to see an engineer in charge is a great sign. On the other hand, I struggle to believe that there will be a mass attraction of the best talent in Silicon Valley towards Yahoo just because Marissa's in charge. Sure. And so even if engineers love the fact that a geek's in charge, I think for shareholder value, investors love someone who can drive revenue and profitable growth. And as much as geeks hate this, media businesses make a lot of money. Like if you think about OMG, right, which is a Yahoo property, mm-hmm. I'm guessing the percentage of their traffic that's geeks is sub 5%. And yet,
I don't know, they have some pictures on there that
might get geeks. Okay. But, well, you can tell me about that later. I don't actually go there, Jonathan. But my point is that there are these great properties from Yahoo Sports to Yahoo Finance to OMG. They're the market leader in video outside of, not as a YouTube platform, but because they have the eyeballs and mail. And none of those are geek products.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think the most interesting, if we're going to take a kind of a step back in the aperture here, like the most interesting thing for me is that Yahoo has been around since 1996, I think. So 16 years into the company's existence. And we're still having New York Times articles about what's Yahoo going to be when it grows up. There's never actually been a clear statement in the entire 16 years.
But that's exactly the problem in my mind. So
that to me is more interesting than what should it be. It's the fact that it's gone 16 years, an IPO, a boom and a
nobody
bust.
knows what it is. And I think behind Ross Levinson, it would have been more clear. And for example, my argument many years ago when Yahoo was doing search and launched Panama, if you remember Panama, was going to finally, they bought Overture, a company we funded, and they were going to compete with Google. The narrative for so many years in the press was Yahoo's losing to Google. Yahoo's losing to Google. And so internal morale, horrible. Ability to attract people, horrible through those years. And in fact, search was such a small part of what they did. And they could have said, we're not competing with Google. We have a great media company, and here's how profitable it is, and here's how we're positioned. And then the market would have written a different narrative. So my lesson for MySpace, when Mike Jones first took over, my message was just say we're not competing with Facebook. Facebook won. And
he did that. He listened to you.
No, it took about more than a year.
Okay. You need to be more convincing.
I'm not very persuasive. Nonetheless, it's easy to say on the outside. He had a very difficult set of cards dealt to him, and I can't imagine what that would have been like. But my analogy, nonetheless, armchair quarterback here, is if you would have gone out and said, Facebook won, guys, story's over, and here's what we're going to do, and here's why it's meaningful, you wouldn't have had the 18 months of blasting stories about how MySpace is crumbling, and they just never stopped, the MySpace stories.
So, I think you bring up a great point, because I think I can empathize a bit with what Mike went through internally, because I was there when Yahoo, I was there a little bit after they bought Overture, but I was there during Panama and the whole search, double down and all of that stuff. And hindsight's 2020. At the time, Yahoo was the behemoth, right? And Yahoo had been successful, it was on the rise, and had really reconstituted the whole internet market. It was the only internet stock that was going anywhere, and the market loved it and everything. And to say, oh no, we're going to concede this space to this nascent pre-IPO startup, company here.
But I'm not talking about Google pre-IPO. I'm talking about after the battle it was pretty apparent that Yahoo
but when you're talking, sure.
Because back then Yahoo had Inktomi and was doing its own.
But Yahoo bought Inktomi as a response. So it depends when you're talking about it, right? So Yahoo bought Overture and Inktomi and like 7 other companies in the search space to
try and compete with Google.
Right.
And that was fine in the early days. But at some point...
Then you get into sunk cost fallacy, right? Because then they've spent all this money...
Explain sunk cost fallacy so that people understand it. You said it twice.
You probably explain it better since you're the one who told it to me. But it's the idea that, going forward today, amortizing the investment you've made in the past actually should have no bearing on your decision of what's the best path forward.
It comes from accounting, and people basically say every decision you make going forward ought to be based on how you expect your financial returns to be going forward, as opposed to investments you've made in the past. Investments you made in the past are a sunk cost.
They're never coming back.
And if you make economic decisions going forward based on your past costs, you are more likely to make bad decisions.
Right, and there's a reason that it's got a term, is because it's something that comes up a lot, right? Yeah. And so if you think about you're the board of Yahoo, or you're the management of Yahoo going to the board, and you're saying, we've just spent, exactly the purchase price of Overture. It wasn't cheap at the time.
No.
We've just spent billions of dollars in acquisitions.
They should have spent more on it.
You and I have differing viewpoints on that one.
We're gonna come back and talk about app.net and Twitter API. Sorry to cut you there, but I want to make sure, since we're not app.net, to talk about Walker Corporate Law. Walker Corporate Law was founded by Scott Walker. His Twitter handle is @ScottEDWalker, @ScottEDWalker. And I have to tell you, I follow him on Twitter. I think as a lawyer, I have really appreciated his willingness to be transparent in the way that many venture capitalists have started over the last 5 years to blog and talk about topics. And he does it from a unique legal point of view. And I have to say, 99% of everything he's written, I've found myself nodding my head and appreciating that I'm getting a lawyer perspective on issues like convertible debt, something that comes up a lot. So it's a boutique law firm, but all of his lawyers have 10 to 20 years of experience. They don't have junior associates, so you're not paying for a brand and then getting the junior guy doing the work. Scott encourages fixed fees, but believes that billable hours reward inefficiency. So he encourages fixed fees. As it happens, almost every time I'm negotiating with lawyers, I ask for fixed fee contracts. And then I say, if any major changes happen relative to what we expected in this deal, then I'll allow you to negotiate why I should pay you more. But I push for fixed fees. So if you want to talk to the founder, you can actually call Scott directly. Wow, he's... I
don't even do that.
I hope my prompt here is not incorrect in saying he's okay for me to give you his phone number, which is 310-288-6667. I wonder if that 666 was intentional.
Yeah, and let's hope no Redditors or betards are watching right now.
And I hope that's not his home number on accident. But
it could be a burner number.
Yeah. But I really do appreciate Scott and the work that he does at Walker Corporate Law, which is why I follow him on Twitter to make sure that I am regularly getting access to what he's writing. Let's talk about...
I was just going to say, as a guy who's learned the hard way, as a startup founder dealing with lawyers, there's a lot of stuff that's standard and boilerplate, and fixed fees are a really good way, a very startup-friendly way to go.
So we're going to talk about app.net. We're going to talk about the new Twitter API announcement and get your views on that. But I do want to go to the chat room. I have a question from Mike, Pmalai, Pamalai. Sorry, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right. Mike, that I can't pronounce, would like to know, what was the fundraising process like? And how did you overcome it with the perception that Awe.sm competed with Bitly?
All right, that's a great question. So the fundraising process itself is, I don't know that there's anything, first of all, it's different for everybody. I've now been through it basically 3 times. And at each stage, it's different. You learn a lot, but it's new challenges, each time as you're going out to different people who have different expectations because you're trying to hopefully raise more money. It's miserable.
Yeah.
I think that there's actually, I would commend, there's a great post, guest post by a friend of mine. He's at Bubs on Twitter. He wrote a guest post on TechCrunch.
B-U-B-S?
B-U-B-S. Darius Monsef IV, I believe, founder of Creative Market. And he wrote a post on TechCrunch that's called, I think, when raising money, you've got to make your own heat. Mark, I was really, really lucky, relatively speaking, to have Mark as an early investor because as someone who has been on both sides of the table, if you will, his insights and advice have been, we're always spot on.
I don't want to interrupt you because you're hopefully going to say something great about me, which is always nice. No, but this is, if you could bring this up for a moment on the screen, is this it? The Art of Raising, it's Darius, Monsef, and he left off the 4th. The Art of Raising Seed, you're either hot or you make your own heat.
Yeah, that's an amazing post. Since it's come out, anybody who's come to me asking about advice on fundraising, that's what I send them because it's basically a lot of things that you, Mark, told me and a lot of things I learned on my own. But yeah, there's a lot of dating elements to it. It's kind of like, I think Mark always used the analogy with me of asking a girl to the prom. I didn't go to the prom. I never asked anybody to the prom. So I didn't have a lot to draw on there. My biggest mistakes were definitely not following your advice more. And I say that when I'm not on the air with you as well.
But what would you advise people to do differently?
Don't think. I think the number one thing is don't think that you can fundraise and do anything else. Sometimes you have to. Mark, you've used in our conversations the analogies of being the president.
Yep.
Barack Obama has to deal with natural disasters and financial meltdowns as well as move the ball forward on his agenda. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You've got to raise the money, and you've got to do customer support, and you got to code, and you got to run product, all those things. And that's really the hardest part, is when you can't go dark. One of my friends is Joe Fernandez, CEO of Clout. We shared office space with Joe and 4 other companies when we were all 4 people, 3 people. And I remember when Joe raised their big Series A, and he basically told me he was out of the office for 6 months. He just put the company in the hands of, and he was lucky enough at that point where he had a good team that he could do that, but he put the company in the hands of the people that he trusted, and he went and he raised money, and he didn't do anything else but raise money. You kind of have to have that approach, because the longer it draws out.
Can I want to challenge that.
Yep.
And this is something I talk about a lot. And there's no question you have to dedicate time to fundraising. But here's the problem that I see, Jonathan, with most founders, is they imagine that there's an event called fundraising that one has to do once a year or once every 18 months. And so they do nothing. It's kind of like, I want to be in shape, and I'm not going to diet for 10 months of the year, but
I'm going to run a marathon.
But a month before I go to the beach, I'm going to juice for a month or whatever. And I think it's a great analogy because, aside from being 2 chubby Jewish kids here,
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
I was going to make a joke about not being Jewish, but my mother would kill me because she's going to watch this.
Yeah. So no, but the thing is, like, you can't expect to do everything in 1 month and end up in great beach shape. And so what I recommend to people is you're always raising. I call it ABR, and it's just like, think of your life as a startup entrepreneur as a pie chart. And you've got a certain amount to go to product, a certain amount to go to marketing, a certain amount to go to sales, a certain amount to go to financial reporting, recruiting, and everything. Just like I always say, always be recruiting. And so you're always taking breakfast meetings with potential candidates, even when you don't have spots on your team open. Because one day when you have spots open, now you've got a pipeline. And the same is true about venture capital. You need a pipeline. You need people who have seen you over the course of the last year. And they need to have relationships with you, because if you go to see someone and they think, wow, that was a good pitch, to get from that to a signed order is a long way. And so a lot of people argue against that, and they say don't do that because you're going to set a bad perception in the mind of investors because you're not ready to fundraise. And I think the best time to see a VC is when you're not fundraising, is to say, look, I'm not raising, I got a year's worth of cash. I just want to tell you now what we're up to.
Yep.
I want to get some advice, and I want to establish a relationship with you so that in 9 months, when we're fundraising, you know us better and you can determine if we're a good fit. And frankly, so we know you better, and because we don't want to run a competitive process. We want to just find who resonated the most. Throughout that relationship, you get benefits that people don't talk enough about, which is if you go meet a partner from Excel, or Excel, I always say that wrong, from Excel, and
spelled the same.
And you meet a partner there, and they like you enough. It's easy enough for you to say, hey, listen, I would love to get an intro to X. And I know you're an investor in Stumbled Upon. Would you mind just introducing me to Stumbled Upon? And it's much easier to get access and interest. And also you actually see, do they respond to your emails? Are they engaged? Are they helpful? And so for my mind, you ought not to be out of the office. The be out of the office for 6 months is the equivalent of, I got to get in shape for the beach.
Fair enough. And you're exactly right. I think that example of that I gave was a bit hyperbolic. If there were 2 things, so I do think there is a time when you're actively fundraising, and I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they can do that and other things at the same time, which once you, like, per this post, if anybody reads it, when you are actively fundraising, the time, and you've counseled me on this, the more time you're in the market, right, the worse it looks for you.
Which is why you're never raising.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And to your point, if you can lay that groundwork so that you never have to do this, that you never even get to this point, that is definitely one of my lessons that I learned, from a primary lesson that I learned as well. And I've actually counseled friends to be doing the same. It's always easier to get a meeting with, a VC or the meetings go a lot better when you don't have your hand out.
Yeah.
Someone once blogged about investing in lines, not dots or points. Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. Also, it builds. It's like dating in that way too, right? You don't just walk up. Some people are great at walking up to a girl at the bar or a guy at the bar and saying, "Hey, you want to go out?" But a lot of people are a lot better at developing a friendship with somebody and seeing where that goes. And I think that, yes, do what Mark said, because he's exactly right. If you can be socializing your ideas, the other thing I would say, just in addition to that, is in addition to socializing your ideas with investors and building those relationships, you're also auditioning. You're also showing them how you would treat customers, how you would treat partners, where your head's at. So you have to think about what you're signaling them as you go. So, always be responsive, even if it's a minor, like, hey, send that follow-up note. Hey, thanks so much for the meeting, and see what you can do for them and show that you're, the skills that they are going to want you to be applying in your business. Show those, demonstrate those in the, in the context of dealing with them.
Absolutely agree with that. Let's talk about app.net. I guess you know something about it.
I spent $100 on that.
Did you?
Yeah.
So you get 2 user IDs? Is that how it works?
No, yeah.
I thought it was only 50 for a user ID.
It was the developer plan. I haven't expensed that yet.
Why is app.net? It's Dalton Caldwell.
Dalton Caldwell.
Dalton Caldwell. For some reason, I find that hard to say. Why did he create app.net, and why is it getting so much attention?
I don't know that I have right answers to. I don't know I have enough information to give you an authoritative answer on either of those things. But we're on a talk show.
We make it all up there. Yeah.
I've actually met Dalton. Ironically, the first time he and I met was at a Twitter developer event. Mm-hmm.
And he built iMeme.
So Dalton's had a very interesting career in that, he was the founder of iMeme, founder and CEO of iMeme, and then went on to start Mixed Media Labs, from which Pick Please, the early Instagram competitor that is probably most famous for Andreessen Horowitz choosing Mixed Media Labs over doubling down on Instagram, because they invested in both of them when neither of them were competitive. Instagram was originally something called Bourbon. Yep. But so, he's gone, and app.net is actually a product of Mixed Media Labs. So it's a pivot, if you will. He's written some great blog posts on the subject.
Well, let's start with the first that got all the attention. He wrote a blog post against Facebook, basically saying that...
That wasn't the first.
Well, that
got a lot of attention.
That was the one that got the most attention.
It was the most inflammatory one, that's for sure.
That is true. But I do think that's when a lot of people started paying attention. He basically said that Facebook invited him in to present under false pretenses, that Facebook had the intention to come in and say, we're going to do a partnership with you, and then Facebook was fairly hostile as a platform to him in that era. And then
I don't think they were acting as a platform at that point.
And then they wanted to acqui-hire him, I think, as a company, and that's not, I guess, what he wanted. And subsequent...
Well, it was also, I think, the implicit other hand. It was kind of like, here's the small carrot of an acqui-hire, and here's the,
big stick if you don't.
Right, that we're going to build this shit, and we're going to crush you. Right. Because you're doing something that we deem competitive. We're going to do this. You can either do it here with us, or
we'll crush you,
or we'll beat you.
And I want to come back to that, we can acqui-hire you or crush you, because it's a theme that has been part of my career for 15 years. And the second thing that he subsequently did is wrote a series of blog posts that ad-supported media companies or even ad-supported tech companies are evil. I'm simplifying, and he would say, no, Mark, that's not what I said. But if I was to distill it down, he's kind of said, products and companies that stay independent of ads are going to be better value for their community, more pure, and therefore I'm going to launch app.net, which I guess he's suggesting will always be ad-free.
Yeah, I think there was a good post by Mike Masnick of Tech Dirt about that there's no inherent virtue or no greater inherent virtue in a paid product versus an ad-supported product, which just theoretically I agree. I think Dalton's point was more, a lot of people are up in arms by their perception, I think more so for Twitter than Facebook, right? Facebook was a very successful product before they opened their platform. Twitter, on the other hand, it's impossible to disaggregate Twitter's rise and their success in getting to where they are today from the adoption of Twitter as a platform and what all the innovation that the developer community created on top of the Twitter APIs, right? And that some of which Twitter has co-opted, some of which and made part of their core product now, some of which they've shut down. But you cannot deny that Twitter would not be where it is today. It might be somewhere equally good but different if it hadn't been for the hard work and innovation and capital that was poured into the community of people developing on their APIs. And I think there's a sentiment among the kind of utopian, if you will, community of developers. And the web is I was explaining this to my parents last night. I was talking about, as a quick aside, NBC's Olympics coverage. And I said I don't care enough about it to care whether it was time delayed or not. What I cared about was that their commentators and their directing was, utter crap. Yeah. And as an example, I said, during the opening ceremonies, one of the commentators didn't know who Tim Berners-Lee was. Right. Which then got a whole discussion about Tim Berners-Lee and who he is, the guy who invented the HTTP and the World Wide Web. And so my parents asked, well, did he get rich off of it? And I was like, no. If he had chosen to commercialize that standard instead, that protocol instead of making it an open standard, the web wouldn't have, every web link wouldn't have HTTP in front of it today. It would be something else, right? And there's an extension of that on the web of there's still a community, including me, to a certain extent, who believes that there is good that comes from open source and open standards and a community of people working together to create a common good rather than just take as much of the, create a bigger pie rather than take the biggest slice for yourself in doing. And those people, especially those who invested their time and energy in creating value on top of the Twitter platform, feel a sense of entitlement.
And Chris Dixon sort of wrote a tweet, I think yesterday or the day before, saying this, which is, don't make jokes about a platform until you've invested years of your time and energy into something to have it all taken away from you. Let me just say this. I think there is a certain... Caveat emptor
is my answer to that.
Yeah. So in case anyone doesn't know, it means buyer beware. The thing I would say is there's a certain naivete, I believe, in Silicon Valley. And let me explain the naivete this way. In the real world, there are channels that distribute products, and there are people who produce products. Every producer of a product, and now let's use an example. Let's say you're a Snickers bar. You're a Snickers bar. Well, you could set up retail shops for Snicker bars. Not very efficient for you to do so. Or as a retailer, someone who actually has shops, you could try to make your own Snicker bars, but then you've got to make lots of other things. So in the real world, you tend to have product companies, and you tend to have distribution companies. And there's always a tension that exists. So, for example, in the era before hypermarkets, let's say Walmart and Carrefour and people like this, product companies had a little more power because there was not a strong global distributor. In the growth of Walmart and Carrefour and other companies like it, Sam's Club, Price Club before
Sam's
that.
Club's part of Walmart. Sam Walton.
Yeah, so Sam's Club, Price Club.
There's one that you guys may have invested in, Costco.
Yes, Costco. We did invest in Costco. And we were actually created by Carrefour.
Interesting.
So, but my point is that you take the hypermarket. Mm-hmm. Now, their goal is to leave as little a profit for its product producers as possible.
Sure.
And in a perfect world, what they'd like to do is sell Walmart bars. And they would look and feel and taste like Snicker bars.
Yep.
They're Walmart bars. Because on Walmart bars, they get much better margin, right? So if you go to Costco, you'll notice they have Kirkland.
Yep.
And Kirkland is produced by someone else. It's contract manufacturing, but more margin goes to the distributor. This tension always exists between producers and distributors. Now, how do producers control their world? Number one, you have to build a brand. Number two, you have to get out and convince people that Snicker bars taste better than Kirkland bars, even if it's the same bar. You got to convince people of that need. And then the other thing you have to do is you have to realize if you only sell through Costco, they're going to have power over you. If you sell via Costco, Walmart, Safeway, Lucky, Ralph's, and everywhere else, you have other distribution points. And to the extent that you could say, okay, well, Mr. Costco, everyone wants Snickers, and if you're going to not put us, with high prominence in your stores, and you're going to only promote Costco bars or Kirkland bars, we're just not going to supply you Snickers. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to lose Snickers because that's part of their sales. So I know this is
leverage.
It's long-winded explanation to say, if you develop a product, if you want to build your own community and be your own retail shop, you can do that. And yes, you're not going to have a distribution challenge. It's incredibly costly to go put up Snicker stores everywhere. So we put our Snicker bars in the App Store, and we put our Snicker bars on Facebook, and we put our Snicker bars on Salesforce.com, and we put our Snicker bars on Twitter. Now, I have to make sure that enough platforms carry Snicker bars, and I've got to be good enough at marketing to let the community to know that they want Snicker bars.
I'm just envisioning a rich media tweet that I can eat now. I haven't had breakfast.
But look, I wanted to use a simpler example of Snicker bars because the analogy really does hold. Sure. Silicon Valley.
Let's bring it.
Get over yourself. There are distribution platforms. Their job is to make money. And your job is to convince people that even though those distribution partners exist, they ought to use your service by building something that's better than they can build with multiple distribution partners, build awareness for your product, build a brand, and have consumers demanding to have your service. And if you do that, you'll be fine.
So I guess I will play the Northern Californian over here. I should maybe start a blog called Both Sides of the State.
Okay.
I understand the perspective, having grown up here and having.
And I grew up in NorCal.
Yeah, well, there you go. But I think in terms of am I a commercialist or a techno hippie? I'm probably lean more towards the techno hippie side of things. Yeah. I think there's more to it than that. First of all, you could look at, let's take an example from here just to poke a little bit of holes in the Snicker bar distribution analogy. The content owners, we'll say movies, right? They license their content to pay TV, mm-hmm. Showtime, Cinemax, et cetera, HBO, Cinemax, same thing. And they get paid more for exclusive distribution. So, there's an inherent, you'd think, why wouldn't they want their stuff to be on Netflix, iTunes, everywhere you could possibly put it? But they actually can make more by getting guaranteed money up front because there's inefficiencies in that distribution model where you pay $150 for cable TV, they can get a bigger piece of that. But so I'm not sure it holds up all the way every time. But I agree with.
Sorry, you're just to be clear, your example is a good one, which is I'm not suggesting you always have to have 8 or 10 or as many distribution points. It's always going to be a decision, economic decision. Let's take, for example, I've got the great analogy for you.
All right. It's an
when
analogy war.
Instagram
Yes.
came out, they were only on iOS. And because they were only on iOS, they got tons of Apple support. And they were able to build a large enough community in Apple before launching on Android.
Fair enough.
So there are
But they also distributed their photos through Twitter and Facebook,
Yes.
And anywhere else they could.
But if they hadn't built a great company and a great brand and gotten the arc of users,
Totally.
they wouldn't have had the power to get Apple behind them. So you always have this.
I totally agree. And what I would say in the context of the Twitter debate specifically, what's interesting is if you rewind, this is, it astonishes me to people that there are people, and I think Chris Dixon writes a lot of great stuff on platforms and the idea of compliments and the competition there. But, it astonishes me to hear people today talking about this stuff like it's new news when you had Microsoft, someone talked about it in some of the coverage this week. Microsoft had the embrace and extend approach with the unwritten third part of exterminate, right? So Microsoft created a platform in Windows. The only way that they could get adoption of Windows is if a whole bunch of independent software developers, ISVs, created applications that ran on Windows. That was going to make Windows more valuable as a platform. And so that's what they started doing is developers, right? And they got a whole bunch of independent software ISVs to build applications on Windows. And then when Windows got enough leverage, right? So when they became the Walmart, as opposed to, they needed Snickers bars in order to get people in the door. But once they became Walmart, they basically said, hey, I've got a Walmart bar here for the Office Pro, for the productivity suite, right? There was plenty of stuff.
But you're exactly right, which is what I said about Facebook versus MySpace is that Facebook, when they first came up with the Facebook platform, basically said, everyone come build your apps on us. We're open. We don't charge anything. And MySpace at that time had been pissed off because they allowed YouTube and they allowed PhotoBucket to become huge.
Yep.
And then they got acquired by they bought PhotoBucket and YouTube, of course, was bought by Google. And
for
so
twice as much money as
MySpace was going closed when Facebook was going open. I think that was a huge mistake. I think open wins. I am a bit of a techno hippie like you are, but with a commercial practicality about me. And I'm very Hobbesian. I believe like you've got to become big and powerful, or you got to figure out how to work with the big and powerful people. But so Facebook did a great job. And then once Facebook became this behemoth, then they earned the right to go back and say,
sure,
now we're going to tax you.
And I think that, and there was a lot of uproar at the time. Facebook made a lot of changes initially to their apps. They at least were able, there was a lot of furor around that, but at the time it was kind of dimmed by the fact that Facebook was doing this under the guise of user experience and being user-friendly, because you had a lot of people who were basically exploiting the Facebook platform and every little loophole they could to create these viral loops. And
Facebook benefited from that. They benefited, and they had to curtail it so they could get growth but not seem spammy.
But then, right, exactly. And so they did it all under the, we don't want to be spammy, but ultimately what they got to a point where is, you need to pay us for distribution, because even though now everybody believes that there's the potential to get free distribution, viral distribution on Facebook, that was because there's evidence from the old days before we locked everything down. Now, if you really want to build a business on Facebook, you need to pay us for ads to promote your stuff, because that's the only way to really get it. And then they rolled out the credits,
but this
and
is
they did all
just
that
a
stuff.
normal part of commercial life that has existed for thousands of
Totally.
years.
And that was my point with Microsoft.
That's all I'm trying to say. So, for example,
we're in violent agreement.
I agree. I agree we're in agreement. No, I disagree that we're agreeing that we're in agreement. But look, here's the thing. If you're a developer and you're going to get your knickers in a twist over a big company saying to you one of the following two things: hey, we could acquire you, but if we don't, we're going to have to build what you're doing, right? And it's just the fact of life. Or you can sell to us, or we're going to buy one of your competitors. either of those messages is sell to us or we'll crush you. And look, that's just life. Like, put yourself in their shoes, abstract yourself from your shitty little company, and just acknowledge that that's the way business works. And it's Hobbesian. They're big, they're gonna treat you like that. And you, as a company, have got to continue to build a better product, out-innovate them, and convince them. Almost every company that I've invested in, almost every one has gone through this. Like,
it's business. There's no sense of fairness. Nothing is owed to you. You want something, you have to earn it. You have to take it.
When Salesforce bought my company, they did a review of 8 or 10 different document and content management companies that they might buy. And they said to me throughout the entire process, if not you, we'll buy someone else. And if we don't buy someone, we'll build it. So if you want to succeed, sell to us. And I just smiled because I'd been through this so many times. Steve Case wrote or maybe it was a book about Steve Case. It was a brilliant book about how in the early days he went to see Bill Gates when he was creating AOL. And Bill Gates essentially said to him, according to the book, I can buy you or I can bury you, which is it going to be? And, AOL, at least for many years, did great.
So I think, there is a lesson here, and I think most sober people haven't even jumped into the debate about the Twitter stuff because they're too smart to. The latest Twitter API changes, because really it's what you said, right? It's your business. You get something, you get what you pay for. You take something for free from somebody. They have every right. The terms of service are there. They have every right to change them. They have every right to change the rules. That you are entitled to nothing other than what you can do for yourself, right? And so that's fine. I think that Twitter in particular has a PR. I think MG Siegler wrote a post on his Subtle, I think, about it was Twitter has a landscaping problem, and whether or not you believe the developer community is important to Twitter going forward. There is no doubt that it was in the past and that Twitter exploited that.
So we are going to hit Twitter head on. I just want to do one more thing before we do. But
let's do it.
But we are going to hit that head on, which is the last thing on
promoted tweet, if
no,
you will?
the last thing on app.net.
Oh, okay.
Which is, look, in a purist world, in a utopian world, everyone hates advertising. The only thing they hate more than advertising
is paying for shit.
Is paying. And there are people, I always tell startups, there are people with more time than money and people with more money than time. And you've got to figure out who your product is targeting or if you can target both. And the reality is that everyone gets this great utility out of Twitter. They're investing tens of millions of dollars in a great product that we all consume. And I saw on Twitter, someone was saying yesterday, yeah, we're all having this debate about Twitter and hating on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Twitter, right? Like the irony of that.
I think it was Kevin Chang said something along those lines.
And that resonated with me. I don't have any problem with a new community emerging, app.net. I have no problem with that. And if it chooses to go down a purist model that says I don't want anything ad support, I don't have any problem with that either. And I don't have a problem being a user or developer or any of that. I just believe that there are some people that's going to resonate with, and some people prefer free.
So
here's one last point.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I will let you talk, but
no, I want to talk about
also
this.
Recognize that by having advertising is what it takes to get brands behind an initiative. Getting NBC, for example, in the Olympics behind an initiative is knowing that they actually have this great platform that they can use to promote their business.
Sure. Well, that last point, I think advertisers love Twitter because they get a lot, they get a lot of value for very little money with that, or no money with no advertising. And that's the same reason why developers love Twitter and everybody loves Twitter, is because it's a promotional mechanism. I don't see Twitter as a platform. I see it as an audience. And that's the thing I don't really, so this is my open question about app.net. I've been meaning to ask Dalton this, but I don't know him that well. And so if you're watching, Dalton, you can @JStrauss on Twitter. But what is a real-time messaging platform without millions of engaged users? Right, everybody I talk to, and this goes back a little, plug for Awesome here. The reason people integrate sharing into their applications is for marketing value. They're trying to drive user acquisition and engagement. That only works if there are users on the side that you're engaging, right?
Are you worried about the Twitter API announcement in the context of Awesome?
No.
Will it impact you in any way?
No.
But you're a third-party developer that develops an application that integrates with Twitter. Are they looking to shut you down?
No, because I'm not trying to replicate Twitter for consumers, right? What we do, everything that we do is kind of focused on people who are taking behaviors that Twitter likes, which is pushing content into Twitter, right, to try and drive traffic back to their application or their site.
What do you perceive the Twitter API announcement? What was it?
I was basically saying it's official now. We've been hinting at this for, you can go back, they've been hinting at it for months, if not years. You can't build a Twitter client anymore. You can't build a consumer-facing experience. They're a media business. They need as many of the people who are engaged with Twitter as possible, the highest percentage of their user base to be, for their eyeballs to be on something that Twitter owns.
Right.
And if it's not on something that Twitter owns, if you read between the lines of you can't, if you're going to present the tweet content, you can't alter it in any way. So it has to be, you have to present it exactly as it's given to you in the stream, which means any promoted tweets would need to show up there, and you don't get a rev share.
Right.
And they already set up that you can't put advertising around it too. So they're basically saying consumers are our bread and butter. We're a media business. We need eyeballs, and we're going to shut down people who are siphoning those away.
In addition to the ad angle, which I know is what most people focus on, I also believe that they do want to control user experience. I do believe they have an Apple-like mentality with not quite yet Apple-like product, but Apple-like mentality that user experience matters, and we've got to be able to control the end-to-end user experience.
And it's not even. I think maybe in the Jack Dorsey age, the second coming of Jack Dorsey, it may be more Apple-like in motivations. I know from folks who worked there, in the Ev Williams era, that the main thing was in terms of user acquisition, there was a lot of user confusion. Right, and so it was literally about a consistent user experience, let alone not even the best user experiences, which is kind of Apple's thing. For them, there was an existential element that comes before that of if people are experiencing Twitter in different ways, they get confused about what Twitter is. So they were just trying to kind of end user confusion about what Twitter is and what behaviors you can take on it.
So what I have told people, so I'm very public about this. I'm willing to invest more in the Twitter ecosystem, not less. I think Twitter as a technology is more transformational than Facebook in the long run. I don't know which will become a bigger company. I'm not talking about market cap or immediate revenue opportunities, but the distribution of open public information that Twitter provides, I think, is more transformational from a society than even Facebook.
I would just say to that point, if you wanted to put I agree with you completely. If you wanted to put a pin in it, it's default public.
Yeah, it is default public, and it's also asymmetric, which was one of the important things.
Sure, but Facebook was asymmetric. The news feed, Facebook had that too, but it's that.
But
default
Facebook,
public.
When it launched, was symmetric.
Fair enough.
And as a
yes, you're right. The follower relationship.
Relationship.
Sorry, yeah.
And so what happens now is you look on TV, and people aren't saying, "Hey, go to my page at NBC/Brian Williams/fan page," right? They're saying, "I'm at Brian Williams." And when they want to promote the Olympics, it's hashtag NBC Olympics or whatever they used as their hashtag. And I think that's pretty profound, and I think people don't really understand the importance of that. Now, I've invested in a company called DataSift. DataSift takes that real-time open information and processes a lot of the data in advance that allows you to look at more than just what's in the tweet. We can look at, for example, who you're following, and we can interpret stuff about you based on who you're following. If you follow Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, and you don't also follow Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Rachel Maddow, we can probably determine you're more likely to be right-leaning, which happens to be great if to
or
what
you're
you
just
said.
A masochistic liberal.
Could be either. I'm willing to guess higher percentage chance that you are right-leaning. And the important thing is, to what you said, if you are someone who wants to reach that audience, and they've publicly made this information available about this stuff, so if you want to reach that audience and you're in the midst of a presidential campaign, that data will help you to do that. Totally. And I think that publicly available data is pretty profound.
And that comes back to app.net, the thing that I'm just really curious about, and I paid my $100 just as admission to see, and I wanted them to succeed in their fundraising so I could see what they come up with, because they're very smart, talented people, and I'm always, I always believe that there are people out there who know more than me, and there are things I don't, I can't see. So what I want to see is what their idea is of a value of a Twitter platform, a Twitter-like platform, a real-time messaging bus, if you will, with a inherently smaller audience, because it's only going to be people.
But I think that's okay too, and I'm very interested.
But I just want to know what the value is.
But it's not going to be this great big public utility. But for example, you could build use cases around it, right? Like you could have an app.net community of developers who want to talk about development issues, right? So you could build communities, smaller subset communities of people who are really interested in it as purely a communication channel.
Sure. I mean, you could use it
I don't
as
know
a
what
bus.
They plan to do.
You could use it as a, but with standards like PubSub, Hubbub, and things like that, at this point, do you need to pay $50 for there to be, I think you ran out of power over there.
I think I did too, yeah.
Switch the, but, do you need to pay somebody $50 a year to have access to that kind of technology, or $100 a year if you're a developer to have access to that technology? I think it'll be interesting. Is the protocol itself of as a paid service, is the platform itself of value when it's bring your own audience, rather than you're tapping what people really value Twitter for, which is, and Twitter values itself for at this point, which is tapping into the existing audience that they built with help from third-party developers?
Well, what I want to say is that I believe that Twitter has been, in the early days, maybe had some issues about lack of clarity about what developers should build, but they've been pretty damn consistent since Dick Costolo took over. And well, in my opinion,
if you ask them behind the scenes, yes, but there are a lot of people out there, the people who
don't have
are
access.
Yeah, exactly, and that's you're back on that screen. And that, if we go back to Twitter, that's the main thing I think is just kind of the PR headache, is that they really did position themselves, and they have been the best platform out there. Facebook has, for running F8 and all that stuff, it's an awful platform to develop on.
Apple is far more hostile to its community than Twitter, but nobody writes it. And
they've written about it. But the thing is, Apple never set themselves up as, hey, Apple was always transparent with what dicks they were.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, we have the iPhone. And by the way,
this... You meant dick like Dick Costolo.
Right,
Dick,
totally.
Like the word that you can't say.
If you think about the order of operations, this is what matters. The iPhone existed before you could develop on it.
Yeah.
The iPhone was a hit before you could develop on it. You could only do web apps initially.
Yeah.
And Twitter was not a hit before you could develop on it. The apps, people would argue the apps made it a hit.
So I want to do one last thing. I want to close out the Twitter topic and just have a few moments on Awesome before we wrap up the show. But if you could bring up the screen over here, I would be grateful. Anil Dash wrote he's got a great blog called dashes.com. I recommend everybody to read it. He's a great writer. And he wrote what Twitter's API announcement could have said. And he basically took Twitter's announcement and rewrote the whole thing. And it's just brilliantly written. Because instead of saying, here's all the things you can't do, and here's all the new rules, and here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's what we're going to crack down on, he said, hey guys, great news. We're embracing the community. We're allowing you to do all these new things. Here's the things you're going to benefit from. And here's what we're trying to prevent as part of the message, but leading more with marketing than product. And it's brilliantly written. You really ought to read that. And I think that's the magic. I've talked about this for 2 years, the magic of Salesforce.com. They are great at telling the message to the market in a positive spin. And you can get your cynicism and cringe and all that.
I'm cringing as a Salesforce user. I was incredulous until recently. We didn't even bother to like. I believed I'm an example of their success from a marketing perspective. It's so great that they have had to invest nothing in the core product. It is like 1987 web technology. It's like it's so painful to use that you don't use it unless someone's standing over you forcing you to use it.
Luckily, Salesforce is not a sponsor of this show, or I would have to bleep all of that out. But
editorial independence.
This was not meant to be a critique of Salesforce, although you're welcome to that as a guest on the show.
It was only to reinforce how successful they've been in leading with marketing.
And I believe you can do both. And I believe that Twitter, if they were better at telling the positive story about their company, would engender more positive feelings from the community. And I really believe they're positioned for great stuff. As someone who develops and has people who develop in the community, I think they're great to us. Well, as someone who invests in people who develop in their community,
I agree.
I think they really do want to see our community blossom. They just need to tell the story better.
And there are some great people there. And just to reinforce that, like Ryan Sarver and Jason Costa and Doug Williams and all those guys who actually, there's real people behind the scenes here. And they care about this stuff, and they care about what people are saying more than anybody else out there. And I think that can actually, to a certain extent, be a little bit of their problem, is that they're so pulled into the the minutia of the debate by the vocal minority that they're not thinking about it from the Anil Dash perspective. And
they need a CMO who is going to think about it that way and get out in front of the marketing.
A CMO who talks about platform stuff? Yeah. That's a whole...
So let's talk about Awesome, and let's wrap up the show on that note, because it is interesting, I think, for developers to understand the power of Awesome. You and I have talked about this privately, about this idea of short links or static links versus smart links. And we've increasingly been talking about Awesome as providing smart links to developers. I think for the time being, we have conceded that we don't want to be a market for individual consumers to create short links and share them. Mm-hmm. We are a platform for developers, and we're a platform that makes links smart. What does that actually mean?
Basically, there's a whole lot of interesting context about every share action, right? Each tweet, each like, each email, each Google Plus post or whatever they're called, right, has a whole bunch of valuable information in the action itself, implicit to this is going to Twitter versus Facebook. It came from this button on my page or that button on my page, or potentially proprietary information to the application or the website.
But to take that point, and we'll go on to the second point. If I have TinyURL or Bitly or any of the other great URL shorteners, often they provide a single link to a unique URL or web page. So if I have www.markzuster.com and I want to share that, I can't create 5 independently looking unique URLs. So developers create workarounds. So the workaround might be I put a copy of this URL on Facebook and a copy of a short link on Facebook and a copy of a short link on Twitter, and I have to create different page IDs actually in my application so I can track how those perform. Right. Is that true?
Yeah, and or if it's different users, let's take an example of different users of your application sharing something. So you're building referral links or something. So this is something people do all the time. They'll put a parameter in there that identifies the user. Take that and kind of expound on it and say, okay, here are all the parameters that would be unique for each share action. And this is actually the fundamental difference. This is what prompted me to write that email to Andy Weissman that said, hey, we're going to build something different from Bitly, is that the fact that a URL shortener's goal is to keep the links short means that all it's ever going to do is give you one short link for every canonical or long link. And what we were trying to build was much more akin to an ad server, or what powers the tracking in email marketing, where every share action, the results of every share action are being tracked uniquely.
So one of the things Smart Links allows you to do is, with a single URL, be able to create unique short links that allow you to track by channel, allow you to track by individual unique user, And there's also this parent-child relationship. Talk about that and why that's interesting.
There's something inherent to social. So a lot of the concepts are taken straight from just the ideas of outbound marketing and performance marketing in general. So basically all those dimensions of the context of the share, like the channel to where it's going, the user who's sharing it, maybe the campaign it's a part of or something like that. One thing that's super unique to social and we believe is pretty powerful about Awe.sm, because it's really hard to do if you're going to do it yourself, is that unlike, say, email or an ad where all you really care about is who clicked on this and what did they do when they got to my site, in the social world, there's actually kind of resharing actions, right?
Okay.
So maybe Mark, I see this data on your blog all the time. A lot of the people who are hitting the tweet button on your blog are people who originally got there because they clicked through on one of your tweets.
Right.
Right. And so to be able to see which share actions were the result of an earlier share action allows you to map out the spread of content and information through the networks of your audience and how they're being promoted. So you can see that maybe, we got this huge traffic spike because Robert Scoble tweeted about something, but Robert Scoble got there because this guy, this relatively unknown guy who Robert Scoble follows, tweeted about it first. And it's a lot easier to get to that relatively unknown person than it is to get to Robert Scoble, or things like that, right? And
so you find out who's influencing Robert Scoble.
In that context, yes.
So, but
it's about cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
And being able to see that every share action on the individual share action and know the results in terms of visits, page views, signups, revenue, whatever matters to your business.
Short links versus, and you're already hinting at this, but I want to say it in my words, short links or static links can show you who came to your page, but they can't show you the difference between groups of people who come to your page and how they perform.
They can't show you why they came to your page.
Well, even more than why, which is if you have 5 different traffic sources and 4 of them come to your site and don't purchase anything or only visit one page and bounce, the 5th traffic source comes to your page, consumes 10 or 12 pages, and 18% of them end up buying or signing up for a newsletter or doing whatever. Using the Awe.sm platform, that data that tells you how they performed is already built into the link.
Right. Yeah, and that was a logical extension. We set out to help people understand the ROI of sharing. The ROI does not end with the click. It starts with the click, right? It starts with the visit. The ROI, most people are not trying to sell visits to their site. At best or at worst, they're trying to sell page views if they're ad supported. And most times they're actually trying to sell something that requires a user action beyond that. So for us, our mission to be able to bring ROI to sharing and make that actionable for our customers, we had to go all the way to conversions in order to make that vision a reality.
And of course, as a developer, you could try to build all this yourself, right?
I've got a white paper. I think SendGrid is a great example. They do some great marketing around. They write white papers on how to build SendGrid.
Right.
Just to show you how hard it is.
Right.
And I will help anybody out there at Strauss on Twitter or at Awe.sm. You want to know how to build something for yourself, I will help. I will lay it all out for you and help you do it. I'll give you a roadmap. We're a classic infrastructure company. Anybody could theoretically build all this themselves. We live in 2012. It's the idea that you don't have to. You can rent it from us a lot cheaper than it would take for you to build and or operate it yourselves. And we've solved all those hard problems about scaling it, about uptime and all of the things that you would need to figure out for yourself.
Great. Well, listen, I do have to wrap up here. I want to thank Detroit Venture Partners, a sponsor of the show. I want to thank Scott Walker from Walker Corporate Law, another sponsor of this show. And of course, I'd like to thank Jonathan Strauss for coming and debating this week's topics. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.